The chandeliers sparkled overhead like frozen fireworks. Inside the ballroom of the Grayson estate, violins played a delicate waltz, but Daniel Grayson felt anything but delicate. His jaw clenched as he adjusted the black cufflinks on his tailored tuxedo. Every minute spent in this sea of silk gowns and greedy smiles chipped away at his sanity. He didn't belong here, at least not tonight. "You're scarling again," his mother whispered, stepping beside him with a practiced smile. "For God's sake, Daniel. At least try to look pleased." "I'm not," he said flatly. "Well, pretend." Before he could respond, she nodded toward the stage. "It's time." That's when he saw Vanessa Blake glide through the crowd, glowing like a magazine cover in a wine-colored dress. Her hair was pinned into a sleek chignon. Her eyes found his instantly, and she offered a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The music faded. "Ladies and gentlemen," came the voice of Harold Grayson, Daniel's father, from the stage. "Tonight, we celebrate more than just prosperity and philanthropy. We celebrate unity between two powerful families." Daniel's stomach dropped. "As of this evening, we are proud to announce the engagement of my son, Daniel Grayson, to Miss Vanessa Blake." A round of applause erupted. Daniel stood frozen. Engaged. They were announcing it without even telling him. Vanessa looped her arm through his and beamed at the cameras now flocking toward them. He whispered, "This wasn't the deal." She smiled without turning. "It's business, darling. You'll adjust." He felt the walls close in, the lights, the applause, the cameras. A life not his own being carved around him like a cage made of diamonds. He stepped back suddenly. "Excuse me." "Daniel," his mother hissed. "What are you?" But he was already moving, cutting through the guests and down the polished marble hall like a man escaping a burning building. Out the back exit, through the kitchen, past confused staff, into the cool night air. His footsteps echoed into silence. The chaos of the party faded behind him. And that's when he saw her. Kneeling beside a tall potted plant, gathering broken glass into a dustpan, was a young maid. Her chestnut hair was tied in a low knot, wisps framing her face. She wore a faded grey uniform, and her hands moved carefully as she cleaned the shards of a shattered wine glass. She looked up. For a second, just one, Daniel forgot why he'd come out here. Her eyes were deep brown, almost golden in the light, and there was something hauntingly familiar about them. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, rising to her feet. "I'll be out of your way in just a moment." He didn't move. "Do I know you?" She froze. Her breath caught. I don't think so, sir," she replied, keeping her gaze low. "I just started a week ago." He squinted at her. That voice. That face. Something about her tugged at a long-buried memory, lakeside sunsets, laughter on a dock, the soft scent of lavender. But before he could ask again, a security guard came running toward him. "Mr. Grayson, the press is going wild inside. Your mother needs you back now." Daniel turned away reluctantly. The girl had already ducked back into the shadows, vanishing behind the catering cart. As he walked back inside, Daniel muttered, "Who the hell was that?" Back in the ballroom, Vanessa was on stage giving an impromptu toast to their future empire. Daniel felt like a marionette as he took his place beside her, the applause ringing hollow in his ears. But his mind wasn't on champagne flutes or corporate mergers. It was on a maid with haunted eyes. Eyes he couldn't stop thinking about. Eyes that reminded him of someone he once loved and lost. Sophie Marek scrubbed harder than necessary, trying to erase both the wine stain on the marble and the memory of him. Daniel Grayson. She hadn't expected to see him tonight, hadn't even known this was his estate until she'd been transferred here by the agency last week. In the 7 years since she disappeared from his life, she'd worked tirelessly to avoid crossing paths with the powerful and the elite. But fate had a cruel sense of humor. He looked older, colder, broader in the shoulders, sharper in the jaw. No longer the boy who used to race her to the lake dock every summer evening. But his eyes? Still the same storm grey. Still capable of freezing her where she stood. Sophie closed her eyes for a moment, letting the ache in her chest rise before she buried it again. Flashback, 12 years ago. Sophie was 16, barefoot on the sun-warmed planks of her family's lakeside cabin dock. Daniel was 17, shirtless and grinning, holding her hand as they jumped into the water together. That summer was magic. They kissed beneath fireflies, carved their initials into a tree, and made impossible promises: we'll find each other again, no matter what. But the following year, everything fell apart. Her father's company collapsed in a corruption scandal. They lost everything. Their house, reputation, respect. Her father suffered a breakdown and disappeared. Sophie's mother took her and her younger brother to a new city under new names. She never saw Daniel again. Until tonight. Back in the present, Sophie carried her cleaning tray toward the staff quarters, keeping her head down. She couldn't afford to be noticed. She'd used a fake surname on the application, Anna Carter, just like she always did. The Grayson family didn't recognize her, and that was exactly how she planned to keep it. Because the truth wasn't just painful. It was dangerous. That evening, in the small room staff were given in the mansion's servant wing, Sophie opened her phone and stared at a photo of her younger brother, Liam, now 12 and bedridden in a small clinic. The hospital bills were piling up. She worked double shifts to afford the medication that kept him stable. She had no time for the past. No time for a man who kissed like he was still trying to remember her. Down the hall, Daniel sat at his office desk, swirling a glass of bourbon, barely hearing the board member's voice on the phone. Vanessa's father wants an answer on the merger timeline, the man said. Tell them I'm reconsidering everything, Daniel replied, and ended the call. His mind kept replaying the kiss, the soft warmth of her lips, the gasp she made when he pulled her in. She'd smelled like wild lavender. Just like her. He stood up and crossed the room to his private bookshelf, pulling out an old journal from when he was 17. Hidden in the back cover was a photo, faded, crumpled, and still precious. Sophie Merrick. Smiling in the sunlight, a flower tucked behind her ear. He stared at it. Could that Maid, Anna, really be her? It didn't make sense. But neither did his reaction to her. Next morning, Sophie was assigned to prepare the private breakfast lounge, the one used only by Daniel himself. She hesitated before knocking. Enter, came his voice. She stepped in. He was reading the Wall Street Journal, wearing a tailored shirt with the top buttons undone. His watch gleamed. For a second, their eyes met. And held. You're Anna, right? He asked casually, setting down the paper. Yes, sir. From where? Glenridge. Small town near the border. He studied her. You sure? She smiled tightly. Positive. He stood and walked toward her slowly, stopping just a foot away. The air changed. I need a favor, he said. Her throat went dry. Yes. My parents are pushing an engagement I never agreed to. Vanessa Blake. Sophie didn't blink, but inside, her stomach twisted. That name had been all over the tabloids. And I need to make it go away. Fast. You're the only woman who isn't from their world. What are you asking? A fake relationship. Just for a few days. Be my girlfriend until Vanessa backs off. Sophie stared at him. He didn't recognize her. That stung more than it should have. What's in it for me? She asked quietly. I'll pay you. $50,000. You'll move into the guest wing temporarily. Nothing inappropriate. Just appearances. Sophie thought of Liam. Of the bills. Of the summer they lost. She took a deep breath. Fine. Daniel extended a hand. She shook it. Their fingers touched again. For a moment, the past flickered to life. Neither of them said a word about it. By evening, the news was everywhere. Billionaire Daniel Grayson spotted with mystery woman, Vanessa Who. The maid-turned-girlfriend. Internet reacts to shocking twist in Grayson empire. The world had seen the photo, Daniel and Anna stepping out of a black SUV, his hand on her waist, her eyes wide, lips parted, and the kiss. Oh God, the kiss. Sophie sat alone in the lavish guest suite, staring at the TV. She still felt the burn of his lips on hers. It hadn't been real, she reminded herself. He'd leaned in as paparazzi swarmed them at the charity gala entrance and whispered, "We need to sell this. Don't slap me." She didn't. And when his mouth brushed hers, soft but possessive, her knees had gone weak. Now the world believed they were lovers. Even Vanessa. Are you insane? Vanessa's voice shrieked over the speakerphone in Daniel's office. A maid. Really? Her background checks out, Daniel said coolly. And I don't see how it's your concern anymore. Oh, please. You're just doing this to humiliate me. You'll come crawling back when you're bored. Click. Daniel tossed the phone aside and leaned back in his leather chair. But the smugness faded quickly. His thoughts drifted to Anna. There was something in her kiss. Something he remembered but couldn't name. He needed to know who she really was. Meanwhile, Sophie was trying not to panic. She'd agreed to be his girlfriend to save her brother, not to become a viral headline. She stepped out of her room and nearly bumped into Eva, Daniel's younger sister, sharp-tongued, skeptical, and beautiful in an intimidating way. Eva raised a brow. So, you're the famous girlfriend? I guess so. You don't look like his type, Eva said bluntly. No offense. None taken. Eva studied her for a long bit. Be careful. Daniel doesn't play games, and he doesn't fake affection. If he's kissing you in public, you're either real, or really useful. Then she walked away, heels clicking like a warning shot. Later that night, Daniel and Sophie sat on opposite sides of a long velvet couch in the formal lounge as staff prepped the setting for an exclusive new couple interview with Celebrity Hour. I told you the kiss was too much, Sophie muttered, adjusting the neckline of her borrowed designer gown. Actually, Daniel replied without looking at her, it was perfect. They bought it. She rolled her eyes. That wasn't acting for you, was it? He turned to face her. Should it have been? A heavy silence settled between them. But before she could respond, the door opened and in walked the host, a sharp woman with red lipstick and camaraderie charm. We are rolling in 2 minutes. Just be yourselves, she chirped. Sophie gave a fake smile. Be ourselves. Which selves? The ones we used to be or the lives we're living now? The interview was a dance of half-truths. Yes, it was love at first sight, Daniel said smoothly. We met at an art gallery, Sophie added. A stretch, but not a lie, she had cleaned an art gallery once. What drew you to her, Mr. Grayson? Daniel paused. Looked at her. Something in his expression softened. She reminded me of something I thought I'd lost. Sophie looked down quickly. The camera zoomed in. Her lips trembled for just a second. They wrapped in 15 minutes. And Sophie stood up fast, ready to run. But Daniel caught her wrist. We need to talk. She froze. About what? About you. Who you really are. Her chest tightened. I know you're not just some random maid, he said quietly. I've been going crazy trying to figure it out. Your eyes, your voice. I know you from somewhere. Tell me the truth. Sophie's breath caught in her throat. But then she pulled away. No, Daniel. You don't know me. She left him standing there. Down the hallway, hidden behind a pillar, Mrs. Grayson stood silently, listening. She stared after the girl with narrowed eyes. And then pulled out her phone. Vanessa, she said coldly. We have a problem. Daniel couldn't sleep. The house was silent except for the distant hum of the fountains outside. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and walked out onto the balcony, shirtless in the cool air. But no amount of luxury could quiet his thoughts. That girl. Sophie. Why did her eyes feel like a memory? He stared at the moonlight reflecting off the pool and suddenly, it hit him. A broken canoe. Sunburnt cheeks. Laughter on a lake. He was 16 again, stuck at a boring summer camp for rich kids in Vermont. But he'd sneaked out of the fancy cabins every afternoon just to meet a girl on the other side of the lake. She wore cut-off jeans and always had dirt on her knees. Her name had been Anna. Meanwhile, Sophie stood barefoot on the kitchen tiles, eating cold strawberries in the dark like a thief. She couldn't sleep either. She remembered the first time she'd seen Daniel. Not as the billionaire everyone worshipped today, but the awkward boy with paint on his shirt, grinning as he paddled toward her dock. She'd been 15, living with her aunt who cleaned cabins near the camp. They weren't supposed to talk. But that summer, they had. Daniel had kissed her on the last day. And then never came back. Neither did she. Until now. And he didn't even recognize her. She dropped a strawberry. Her hand trembled. You okay? She jumped. It was Eva, again, Daniel's sister. Standing in the doorway in silk pajamas and no makeup. You keep sneaking around like a ghost, Eva said, walking to the fridge. You planning to haunt us permanently? Sophie smiled tightly. I just couldn't sleep. Eva poured out oat milk and leaned against the counter. He never brings girls home. Not since college. And even then, they never made it past breakfast. Sophie stayed quiet. So if you're faking this, you're doing a good job. She turned to leave, then paused. But if you're not faking it, you might want to start running. The next morning, Daniel stood in his study, staring at the camp's website. It still existed. Lake Ember Pines. A private place for elite families and their wild teens. He picked up his phone and called his assistant. Get me the 2013 summer rosters for Lake Ember Pines. I need a list of every staff child or guest who might have used the nickname Anna. Anna, the assistant asked. Sir, is this a legal issue or? Just do it. Click. Daniel didn't like mysteries. But this wasn't just curiosity, it was instinct. That kiss had unlocked something. Something real. Across the mansion, Mrs. Grayson was also on the phone. I don't care if she passes a background check, she snapped. Get me that. Anything. Fake names. Bank records. Family history. I want this made out before she stains our name. Yes, ma'am, the investigator replied. But so far, she's clean. Works under the name Sophie Reed. No priors. Grew up with an aunt, foster background. Dig deeper, she ordered. She hung up and looked at the framed photo on her desk, Daniel, age 6, holding her hand in a little navy blazer. No street girl was going to rewrite his story. That afternoon, a delivery arrived at Sophie's room. Inside the designer box was a red cocktail dress, satin, sleek, and backless, with a handwritten note. Dinner at 7. Don't be late. D. She stared at it for a long moment. Why was she still here? Because of her brother. Because of the deal. Because she hadn't stopped loving him. Not really. She got ready slowly. And when she walked into the candlelit dining room, Daniel actually stood up. You look, he blinked. Unreal. You look uncomfortable, she replied, slipping into the seat opposite him. He smiled. Maybe I'm just not used to pretending this well. They ate in silence at first, lamb and truffle risotto, wine neither of them tasted. Then finally, he leaned forward. I remember now. She froze. What? Lake Ember. The broken canoe. The night we stole the marshmallows from the other kids. Her throat tightened. Took you long enough. I didn't forget on purpose, he said quietly. I think I blocked it out. After that summer, I was shipped off to boarding school. Everything real got buried. And I just became another buried memory. You were never just anything. He reached across the table and took her hand. This time, not for show. Not for the cameras. I should have found you sooner. She swallowed hard. You kissed me yesterday like you already knew. I didn't, he said. But my heart did. They sat in silence. I'm not who you think I am anymore, she whispered. I'm not Anna from the lake. I've been through things. Lost people. Done things I'm not proud of. I don't care, he said simply. She blinked fast. But this arrangement. It's fake. It was. And now. He smiled. Now I think I'm in trouble. Outside the dining room, behind the marble pillar, Mrs. Grayson listened again. She clenched her fist. Then turned and made a call. I want her out of this house by tomorrow night. The next morning, Sophie woke up to the sound of chaos. Not shouting. Worse. Silence. Cold, orchestrated silence that meant something was very wrong. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You don't belong in that house. You're just the help. Get out before it's too late. Her hands trembled. She walked out into the hallway, heart pounding, only to find her suitcase, packed, waiting by the grand staircase. Neatly zipped. Sitting like a bomb. And beside it stood Mrs. Grayson, in a cream suit, sipping her morning coffee like she was hosting a tea party instead of a takedown. I asked you to leave quietly, Mrs. Grayson said without looking up. But I suppose girls like you enjoy a bit of drama. I didn't pack that, Sophie whispered. No. I had the maids do it. They were happy to, considering the disgrace you've brought to this household. I haven't done anything wrong. You've done everything wrong, the woman snapped, her smile cracking. You pretended to be someone you're not. Manipulated my son. Embarrassed our family. And you did it all while scrubbing floors like you weren't calculating every step. I didn't pretend to be anyone, Sophie said, her voice steady now. And I didn't go after Daniel. He kissed me. Which is exactly the problem. Daniel burst through the front door moments later, hair a mess, eyes burning. He'd just gotten off the phone with his private investigator, who traced Sophie Reed to a childhood foster system under the name Anna Bishop. The girl from the lake. The girl he loved. But the second he saw the luggage, he knew. Mother, he barked. What the hell is this? She doesn't belong here, Daniel. I decide who belongs in my home. She's a maid. With a fake name. A tragic backstory. The entire city will think she's seduced you for money. And they'll be right. She isn't lying. How would you know? You didn't even recognize her when she was under your nose. Daniel turned to Sophie. You're Anna. She nodded. I didn't plan this. I just needed work. And then I saw you, and I panicked. Mrs. Grayson rolled her eyes. This is ridiculous. End it before the press finds out. I'm not ending anything, Daniel said sharply. In fact, I'm making it official. He walked over to Sophie and took her hand in front of his mother. We are engaged. Mrs. Grayson dropped her cup. Within hours, The story exploded online. Billionaire Daniel Grayson announces engagement to former Maid. From mob to mansion, who is Sophie Reed? Insiders say he's lost his mind. Or is it love? Paparazzi camped outside the mansion. PR teams begged Daniel to backtrack. But he didn't care. All he cared about was her. That night, Sophie stood on the rooftop, staring at the city lights. Daniel joined her quietly. "Still want to run?" he asked. She shook her head. "I'd only end up running back to you." He took her hand. "I meant what I said. I'm not some fairy tale," she said. "You're risking your company. Your family. Everything. I risked more by forgetting you." She blinked back tears. "You're not just the girl I kissed at 15, he whispered. "You're the only one who ever made me feel real." They kissed again. Slower this time. Deeper. With history in every breath. But love wasn't their only visitor that week. On the fourth day, Sophie's past knocked on the door. Literally. A thin boy, maybe 16, with wide eyes and torn shoes, stood at the gates asking for Anna. Daniel answered. "I'm her brother," the boy said. She promised she'd come back. Sophie ran down the stairs when she heard his voice. "Liam!" she cried, pulling him into a hug. "Oh my God, you found me." "I never stopped looking," he said, hugging her tight. "You said you'd save enough money to get us out. What happened?" Her throat closed. Daniel stepped back, stunned. He'd never heard about a brother. Sophie explained everything, how she left the group home to find work, sending money whenever she could. How they lost touch when Liam ran away. Now he'd found her. And he needed help. But not everyone was happy. Mrs. Grayson watched from the window, fuming. "I warned you," she hissed on the phone to Vanessa. "And you didn't listen." "I tried." Vanessa whined. "He humiliated me." "You want him back?" Mrs. Grayson asked. "Then let's burn her down together." The next day, Sophie received a white envelope on her pillow. Inside was a single photo. Her, at age 17, standing near a shady motel with a man in uniform. She gasped. Daniel walked in, saw the panic on her face. "What is it?" "Nothing," she lied, crumpling it up. "Just junk." But her hands shook. Because she knew exactly what that photo meant. Someone had found the one night she tried to survive. And they were going to use it against her. Sophie sat at the edge of the fountain in the Grayson Estate Gardens, staring at the crumpled photo in her lap. Her hands were trembling, her heart heavy with dread. The image showed her, barely 17, standing outside a seedy motel beside a man in military uniform. She hadn't seen that picture in nearly a decade, but she'd never forgotten that night. The man in the photo wasn't what the image implied. He hadn't touched her. He'd helped her. She had been homeless for 3 days, no job, no food, no coat. The man had seen her shivering behind a dumpster and offered to buy her dinner. That was all. But a picture stripped of context. It could destroy her. She looked up as Daniel stepped into the garden. "You're avoiding me," he said gently. "I needed air." He sat beside her. "You're scared." She handed him the photo. He studied it silently. "Do you want to tell me the truth?" She nodded. "I was 17. I had run away from the last group home because the house mother kept locking me out when I came back late from work. I had nowhere to go. That man, his name was Sergeant Cole, gave me food, a blanket, and a ride to a shelter. Nothing more." Daniel looked at her. "You thought I'd believe the worst." "I thought the world would." He leaned closer. "Sophie, I don't care what anyone says. But we need to find out who's trying to blackmail you." She looked at him with haunted eyes. Your mother and Vanessa. Who else would know? By morning, the photo had made headlines. Grayson heiress to be pictured with mystery man at motel, scandal brewing. From rags to blackmail, is Daniel Grayson being played? Daniel's board of directors called an emergency meeting. Investors threatened to pull funding. His image, meticulously curated, was under fire. And in the middle of it all, Sophie stood frozen as the staff whispered about her. As old money socialites turned their backs. As hate mail arrived by the dozens. Daniel came to her that night, pale and furious. My mother's threatening to dissolve the foundation if I don't break off our engagement. She's using your own company against you. He nodded. And Vanessa? She's claiming you're a con artist who targeted me. Sophie didn't cry. She simply said, then maybe I should go. Don't you dare, he whispered. You're not leaving me again. But Daniel, this is your legacy. You are my legacy, he said. You're the only real thing in my life. Meanwhile, across town, Vanessa stormed into Mrs. Grayson's penthouse. This isn't working, she snapped. He still won't leave her. Mrs. Grayson calmly poured a glass of champagne. Then we escalate. Escalate how? Mrs. Grayson slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents, photographs, even witness statements from a shady investigator she'd paid off. All doctored, all devastating. Tomorrow, we leak the story that Sophie seduced her boss and faked her identity to steal millions. It'll ruin her. Vanessa blinked. That's illegal. Mrs. Grayson's smile didn't reach her eyes. So is slipping your way into a billion-dollar family. We are just evening the scales. The next morning, Sophie opened her inbox and found a single message. We have your brother. Do exactly as we say, or he disappears. Her world spun. She called Liam's number. No answer. Then another message arrived. Break up with Daniel. On camera. By noon. Or Liam's gone. Panic twisted her gut. She ran through the estate like a madwoman, begging the guards, staff, anyone, has anyone seen my brother? No one had. She didn't tell Daniel. She couldn't risk it. Instead, she walked onto the front lawn where the paparazzi waited, straightened her shoulders, and spoke to the nearest camera. I'm ending my engagement with Daniel Grayson, she said clearly. Because I'm not who he thinks I am. Flashbulbs exploded. Reporters screamed questions. She turned and walked away, heartbreaking, tears falling like rain. Inside, Daniel watched it unfold on live TV. His jaw clenched. He ran to her room, but it was empty. Her closet was bare. Her locket, the one from their childhood, was gone. Vanessa called within the hour. I heard, she said softly. I'm so sorry. She fooled all of us. Daniel didn't answer. He just hung up. Then, without a word to anyone, he opened his laptop and called his private security team. Find Sophie. And find out who threatened her. I want everything. Meanwhile, Sophie was led into a dingy warehouse at the edge of town by two masked men. Her hands were shaking, her lips bloodless. And then she saw him, Liam, tied to a chair, a bruise blooming on his cheek. Let him go, she cried. One of the men laughed. Not until you do one more thing. He handed her a small USB drive. Put this in Daniel Grayson's computer. It'll crash his company. We'll let your brother go. Sophie looked at Liam. I'll be fine, he whispered. Don't do it. She closed her eyes. She couldn't hurt Daniel. But she couldn't lose Liam either. Then came a crash. A shout. Boots on concrete. Daniel burst in, flanked by security. Sophie gasped. In seconds, the men were tackled, the USB confiscated, and Liam freed. Daniel rushed to her. "Why didn't you tell me? They said they'd kill him." Daniel pulled her into his arms. "Never hide from me again." Later that night, back at the mansion, Sophie stood by the fire, shaken but safe. "You still want to marry me?" she whispered. Daniel cupped her face. "I wanted to marry you when we were 15. I want it even more now." He dropped to one knee. "No cameras. No PR team. No ring yet. Just me. And you. And everything real." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times, yes. The next morning, Sophie sat beside Liam in the sunroom of a private safe house Daniel had arranged. A warm breeze drifted in through open windows, but her body still trembled from the night before. Liam sipped the cocoa she made him. "You okay?" he asked softly. She nodded, barely. "They used you to get to him. They wanted to destroy everything." He leaned forward. "But they failed. You didn't give them what they wanted. That matters." Sophie stared out at the horizon. "I don't know if it's over yet." It wasn't. Meanwhile, across town, Mrs. Grayson's name was splashed across tabloids and business sites. Daniel Grayson's mother accused of orchestrating blackmail plot. Former heiress Vanessa Cole linked to kidnapping and corporate sabotage attempt. Daniel had released the warehouse footage to his PR team, edited carefully to protect Sophie's and Liam's identities but enough to confirm the truth. He wasn't looking for revenge. He wanted exposure. The public turned instantly. What had once been a scandal about a poor maid seducing a billionaire now transformed into a gripping tale of power, corruption, and the woman who risked everything for love and her brother. Sophie went from a gold digger to national sweetheart. Back at the mansion, Vanessa's world crumbled. Daniel's legal team filed a restraining order. She was removed from all Grayson Foundation events. Brands she was affiliated with began cutting ties. She tried calling Daniel. No answer. She even visited the estate, but the gates didn't open. Instead, a courier handed her a single envelope. Inside was a note in Daniel's handwriting. "You taught me a valuable lesson, Vanessa, about masks. Yours cracked. Mine is off. Goodbye." But it was Mrs. Grayson who refused to back down quietly. That evening, she hosted a private dinner with 2 board members, trying to convince them Daniel had overreacted. "She's a problem," she hissed, swirling her wine. "She's from the streets. Do you understand what that means? My son is blinded by nostalgia and lust." One board member, Mr. Kirkpatrick, looked at her with a weary expression. "Blinded? Perhaps. But we are not. And what we've seen isn't flattering for you." Mrs. Grayson's fingers tightened around her glass. "You can't just erase me. We don't need to. You did that yourself." The next morning, she received a formal letter, removed as chair emeritus. Her influence in the company, gone. Sophie and Daniel, now safely back at the estate, watched the public reaction unfold from a quiet room with no staff, no cameras, just soft music playing in the background. "You didn't have to do all that," Sophie whispered, her head resting on his shoulder. "Releasing the footage, exposing your own family. It could have destroyed your reputation." "I'd rather destroy a lie than live under it," he said simply. She looked up at him. "I don't want to be a shadow in your life, Daniel. I want to be someone who stands beside you." "You already are," he said. "But there's something else." He stood up, walked over to the desk, and pulled out a thick folder. "Before everything exploded, I started an investigation into your past." Sophie froze. He placed the folder in her hands. Inside were court documents, photos, names, and a final report. Biological parents identified: Sophie Monroe. Child abandoned in state custody at 4 months. She blinked at the pages. My mother's name is Evelyn. And my father? Isaac Monroe. A judge. Daniel nodded. He's retired now. But I contacted them. She stood slowly, the weight of 2 decades rising inside her like a flood. Why would you do this? Because I knew you'd never search for them yourself. Her voice broke. Do they want to see me? He hesitated. Your father regrets everything. Your mother, she's in hospice. She asked to meet you. Sophie covered her mouth with both hands. Daniel stepped forward and took her into his arms. You deserve to know where you came from, he whispered. So you can decide who you want to become. A week later, Sophie stood at the door of a quiet care facility, her heart hammering in her chest. The nurse smiled kindly and led her inside. The woman in the bed looked older than her years, pale but beautiful in a frail, tired way. Evelyn Monroe opened her eyes and smiled softly. I knew you'd be beautiful, she whispered. Just like your father said. Sophie didn't know what to say. So Evelyn said it for her. I was scared. I was weak. I didn't know how to be a mother. But I never stopped wondering. Every year on your birthday, I prayed that someone out there was loving you the way I should have. Sophie's eyes brimmed with tears. I wasn't always loved. But someone did find me. And he gave me back my name. They sat in silence, just holding hands. Later, as Sophie stood to leave, Evelyn whispered, Thank you for coming, baby. I can rest now. Back in the city, the Grayson estate prepared for a press conference. Daniel was stepping back from his role as CEO for 6 months. I've been running for years, he told reporters. From my past. From what I really wanted. I need time to build something new, with someone who never gave up on me, even when I gave up on myself. Sophie stood beside him, not hidden, not labeled, not ashamed. Reporters shouted questions. Are you really getting married? Was she really your first love? Did you fake the kiss to escape the engagement? Daniel turned to Sophie and smiled. We didn't fake anything. We just paused the story. But we are pressing play now. That night, under a canopy of stars in the estate garden, Daniel placed a small box in her palm. She opened it slowly. A gold band with a single sapphire, shaped like a teardrop. For the night you cried outside that gate, he whispered. When I didn't see you. She looked at him, stunned. You remembered. I never forgot. Sophie smiled, tears falling freely now. Then yes. 1,000 more times, yes. 6 months later, the Grayson estate bloomed with color. Roses climbed marble arches, fairy lights sparkled in the dusk, and guests in elegant attire whispered in awe at the transformation. But none of it compared to the woman stepping out of the house in a simple, off-shoulder white gown. Sophie. She walked barefoot through the grass toward the garden altar, her long curls tumbling down her back, a sapphire ring glittering on her hand, the one Daniel had given her. The one she never took off. The guests rose. She passed by the same paths where once she pushed a cleaning cart, unnoticed, invisible. Now she was everything. Daniel stood beneath the arch, in a dark navy suit, hands folded, eyes locked on her like she was the only light in the world. And maybe she was. The officiant smiled. We gather here not just to witness a wedding, but a return. A reconnection. A story of 2 people who lost and found each other through time, through status, through storms. Daniel reached for her hands. I was 13 when I first saw you, he said, voice steady. You were chasing butterflies behind the school. You didn't care who saw. You laughed like the world belonged to you. Sophie smiled, tears welling. I thought I'd lost you forever, he continued, but life has a way of circling back when love is real. She took a breath. I was a maid in your house, and yet you saw me. You remembered me. You fought for me when even I had given up. Their foreheads touched. I don't want a perfect life, she whispered. I want a real one. With you. I promise, he said, slipping the ring onto her finger again. You have it. As they kissed, the guests erupted in cheers. But it wasn't the crowd that mattered. It was the small boy in the front row, Liam, dressed in a miniature tuxedo, beaming like the proudest brother alive. It was the nurse from the hospital, wiping tears. It was Evelyn Monroe's photo on a white chair with a flower laid across it, a quiet reminder that healing isn't always loud. And it was Sophie, no longer the maid. No longer the girl forgotten. Just loved. ####1 year later. The Grayson Monroe Foundation opened its doors in a modest building in a quiet neighborhood. Its mission: to offer scholarships and housing to working women raising younger siblings, inspired by Sophie's journey. A photo of her and Liam stood in the entrance, smiling, strong. Reporters asked her often, "Why didn't you stay in the limelight? You're the most beloved woman in the country." She always answered the same way. "I don't want to be adored. I want to be useful." Daniel, now serving only as chairman and not CEO, spent more time in the field, not at charity balls, but at community centers. Their lives were quieter, fuller. One rainy afternoon, Sophie walked down the hallway holding a cup of tea. She paused in front of the guest wing. The same hallway where she once saw Daniel walking with a woman from his engagement. She smiled now. That girl, nervous, jealous, full of self-doubt, was gone. She turned to the west wing, where Liam now had his own room. His laughter echoed as he FaceTimed his classmates from the private school Daniel enrolled him in. He wasn't just safe. He was thriving. Later that night, Daniel joined her on the balcony, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "Want to go somewhere this weekend?" he asked. "Italy. Japan." She shook her head. "I want to go somewhere smaller." He raised an eyebrow. "Take me to that school playground," she said softly. "Where we first met." A week later, they returned to the old neighborhood. The playground was still there. A little rustier. Smaller than she remembered. Daniel stood near the swings while Sophie ran her hand along the old fence. "I was here," she whispered. "When I thought no one noticed me." He smiled. "You were the loudest thing in my world." They sat on the same bench from decades ago. Sophie pulled out something from her purse, a folded piece of notebook paper. Daniel gasped. "You kept it." "The note you gave me before you transferred schools," she said. "I didn't even understand it then." She read aloud. "If I ever become someone someday, I'll come find you. You know it's me, because I bring the butterflies back." She turned to him. "You kept your promise." That evening, they stood once more outside the Grayson estate gate. It was late. There were no reporters, no staff. Just them. Daniel walked over to the intercom and pressed the button. "Hello," Sophie said playfully into it. A moment passed. Then Daniel answered, mimicking a security guard. "Who is it?" "A girl, who once knocked by mistake." He smiled. "And what do you want?" She leaned into the mic. "You. Still." He opened the gate. She walked through, not as a maid, not as a stranger, but as the woman he had always waited for. And this time, the gate stayed open.